It is Wednesday, October 12th. First on the agenda this evening, well, I guess, well, we've done introductions previously, so I don't think we really need to do that. Does any commissioner have any items to add to the agenda for the future? Seeing that, let's move right on to our discussion items. We really have one large topic and a smaller one. So we have an hour devoted to something we found in waiting for our consultant report from the team that's been studying the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. So with that, who's doing the introduction?
I'll give you an introduction. Yes. Thank you, Mayor Norris. Mayor, Commissioners, this is Bob Bailey from AMS Planning and Research. Bob will be doing most of the speaking here. I'll just give you a quick background on this, and then we'll turn it over to him for the presentation, and then, of course, open for questions and discussion. At the end of last year, at the end of 2009, the City Commission decided to form a task force and hire a consultant to help the city guide a community process to develop a vision and operations plan for the end of the Oregon Trail site, which of course has been closed since last year. Not the visitor center. We know that is still open and operating and doing actually quite well. Through a normal competitive RFP selection process, our city hired AMS Planning and Research. Their background is in heritage and historic types of projects and planning and that type of thing. They do these types of projects, I think, all over the United States. So they've got a very good background there. The task force that was formed, I believe, has 17 members, and the purpose of that was to have a task force that represented a cross section of the community. So there are folks that represented a lot of different interests. A total of 3 task force meetings were held in April, June, and August. Additionally, there were 40 interviews that were held with stakeholders, and then there was an online survey that was conducted over a period of about a month. Bob is going to talk about those in more detail, but that just kind of gives you a snapshot of where we've been and how we've gotten to where we're at tonight. So tonight, the main purpose here is just for Bob to give you what is the report. That report was included in your agenda, and I think you've got some bound copies of that as well at your places. So for now, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bob and let him give you the report.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. What I want to do is to walk you through the visioning process that we worked with the task force over the last several months to define a vision for the end of the trail site and examine some options for its potential future use. Quickly by the numbers we had, as Scott said, we had a 17-member task force. We conducted 3 meetings with task force over a 4-month period. We conducted some 46 informant interviews with folks in the community, throughout the county, and throughout the region and beyond. We had 377 responses to a community survey that I'll be talking a little bit about. We examined 9 comparable sites throughout the United States, trying to learn their successes and their challenges. And at the end, we evaluated 21, no fewer than 21 site program options that I'll also be talking about, and the process we went through to evaluate those. So we're going to talk about the research that we conducted. I want to spend a lot of time sort of talking about the vision that that has evolved from this for a sustainable development of the Oregon Trail site, how we evaluate options on the basis of that sustainable plan, and some recommendations and next steps for you. The 40-some interviews that we conducted throughout the community and throughout Portland and beyond sort of gave us a lot of context for this and drove, to a certain extent, our evaluations and directed our research. and this is in no particular order, and it's not our opinions, it's what we heard from the community, and these are mainly sort of the consensus views of the leadership in the community, that one of the key elements of this site is its authenticity, and this is a word you'll be hearing more and more, that this is an authentic site. This ain't phony Disneyland. This is the real site where the end of the trail happened. And the second sort of finding was that the community really wants this site to serve the community, the people who live and work in Oregon City, as well as serve as a site for visitors to Oregon City who are coming here from really throughout the world to see the Oregon Trail and to see and hear the story of the Oregon Trail. One of our big questions was, as you're well aware, the funding of this has been an issue from the very beginning, and the discussions of whether there's state or federal interest in this funding this project, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the research we've done, is one of our big challenges for the future of this site. The other finding was that that the community really wants us to work in conjunction with and in collaboration with the other efforts that are going on in the community, the heritage sites, the economic development, the recreational opportunities in the community, but clearly some competition in terms of location because of the uptown, downtown, end of the trail site. Sort of, what is each of these sites and locations and others going to do in this community, and are they going to compete, or are they going to collaborate? One of the questions that we had at the beginning was, what are the opportunities for this site? Are there economic opportunities? And it was very clear to us that it wants to be an economic development, but under the restrictions of the charter park and under the interests of the community for that matter, they really would like to see economic opportunity there, but not to compromise the authenticity. So some of the evaluations of the opportunities we made were pretty economically driven, but had some issues around how we felt they might compromise the site. And a number of people we interviewed were of differing opinions on how the story should be told. Is it about the end of the trail? Is it about the entire trail? Is it about Oregon City? Is it about what happened after people came here, or how they got here? And there's differing opinions, and part of that is the Native American story and its role in the Oregon Trail and the end of the Oregon Trail site. So we heard a lot of varying opinions, and these were also expressed in the internet survey that we conducted. We developed the internet survey after meeting with the task force and after conducting our interviews with the informants in the community, so a lot of the questions we were asking in the internet survey were driven by the kinds of questions that we were hearing from people in the leadership interviews. As I mentioned, there were 377 responses. Almost half of them were Oregon City residents. They were older. I think the average age was 51 of the respondents. They were highly educated. Well over half of them are college educated, and their income, as they reported to us, was somewhat above the average income here. Not unusual for a survey of this type, and in fact, probably a little more demographically broad than we often get in these kinds of surveys. It is not by any means a random sample of the population. And you'll find that there's a lot of sort of opinions in there that we received that were very much individual opinions. So it was really intended to allow people to express themselves on their thoughts and ideas for the end of the trail site. Again, most of those respondents did not have children at home, and in fact, that's pretty much in line with the demographics of the community. I think the family household in the community is 34%. So we're pretty much on that demographic there. All of them, not surprisingly, were aware of the end of the trail. 3/4 of them had visited the site, but 3/4 almost had gone less than once a year. And indeed, there's indications that they'd gone once and never gone back. And indeed, this kind of reflected a lot of what we were hearing from the community, is that there wasn't a lot of motivation for them to repeat visit the site. They found the exhibits essentially the same over the years that they were there, so there wasn't a lot of motivation to go back and see it again. We asked the internet respondents about their program options. We gave them a long list of options, and this is what they told us. Almost half of them were looking for festivals and events there. And remember, these community people, not tourists so much. They wanted a permanent exhibit at the end of the trail. They wanted, one of the ideas that had come out was this Taste of Oregon City or Taste of Clackamas County was one of the ideas that was put forward in terms of offering showcase for industry, such as Bob's Red Mill or some of the other industries in the community that would showcase their wares. Interest in the farmers market, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and so on. There were really no big surprises in these. We did hear some other program options, and there were 41 of the respondents gave us some of their ideas. And indeed, the ball field baseball stadium idea was a recurring theme throughout our discussions. And as you well know, this was Abernathy Green was the ball field, and there are an element, I think, a vocal element in the community would like to see the ball fields back, and they clearly miss them. And it's one of the options that we did evaluate. Site for the Chamber of Commerce, a new home for the public library, which has also been a topic of conversation, performing arts space, a dog run, a natural history park, and so on. We heard these throughout our conversations with the community, with some exceptions. The dog run, I think, was a fairly unique one.
It already is that.
It already is, indeed. But what was clear from these interviews and from this survey was that multiple use, that it really wants to be a place where a multiplicity of activities and events can happen, and that preservation of the historical aspect of the site, sustainability, are common themes that we're hearing throughout. We did some market, and there's some market analysis in detail in the report. I won't bore you with the details of it tonight, but really, an interpretive center or museum has two distinct markets. There's the people who live here and the people who visit here. And the sub-market of the people who live here might be the school child, which is an important component in museums and interpretive centers. Essentially, the people who live here, as we heard in our interviews, they're looking for change. They're looking for reasons to go back. They're looking for events. They're looking for exhibits that change. For the visitor, it doesn't have to. It can be the same thing, and the visitor will come here, and it can tell a story, and it can be quite static. This is essentially the difference. It describes a great deal of the difference between what is known as an interpretive center and what is known as a museum. The museum essentially combines the changing exhibits with permanent exhibit and offers events. Interpretive centers essentially are places for visitors, and you've all been to them in the national parks and state parks. Interpretive centers are essentially built, and they're built to last for 20 years and stay essentially the same. There's some exceptions to that, of course, and we'll talk about some of the examples we looked at. But this is a fundamental tension in the end of the trail site. Does it serve the visitor? Does it serve the community? And how can it do both? If it is to do both. Essentially, by the numbers again, we have about 2 million people, about 31,000 people in Oregon City, and arguably 50, 60,000 in a convenient sort of driving area with Gladstone and the communities surrounding it, and a couple of million in the greater Metro Portland area. Essentially, Oregon City is very similar to Metro Portland in terms of household income, but is much more described as what we call a working class community with a lower level of the population with college degrees. But again, this sort of use of this site to serve Metro Portland and Oregon City, there's essentially some differences that one wants to sort of think about if the site is to serve both those markets. In the report, there's some market segmentation analysis which looks at consumer lifestyle data and some preferences and interests of the population in the market area. As you say, it's fairly much a middle-income community in the Oregon City area particularly, so that the kinds of activities that we would look at if there was to be some development at the end of the trail site, the issue of affordability would be important. It's very much a family community, so child-friendly, close to home would be important. It's a community, the Greater Portland community, as we all know, is an active community, so there's a lot of interest in outdoor events, biking, and recreational activities are opportunity areas for the Greater Portland area and for Oregon City as well. And indeed, as the population ages, then there is a greater interest in sort of traditional, nostalgia-based activities. We're finding a great deal of interest in genealogy and family histories and people who are interested in finding out more about culture and history of their community as they age. So this is some of the issues around the market. We trying to determine what the visitor market is a rather difficult effort because data at the local level is not collected. There's about 21 million people visit Oregon in 2006, the last number we have, and there's no reason to believe that that's vastly different today. There's been some ups and downs, but the growth has been fairly modest over the last 5 years or so. About 7 million of those visited Metro Portland. When you look in the details here, we've got about 110,000 vehicles a day coming down the 205 and about 35,000 vehicles a day coming up the 99. So this is a highly visible site to a pretty large daily traffic. We don't know the number of visitors in those numbers, but certainly there's a portion of those, probably 5 to 10% or more at times of the year, who are visitors. We looked at the visitor centers in the state, particularly Oregon City, Wilsonville, Mount Hood. I guess the bad news is that it's either growing or declining. The good news is that the Oregon City is declining at a slower rate than all of the others. And indeed, I think the last year has seen a little uptick in the visitor center. So while it's not the most popular, it has passed Wilsonville as a visitor center and is holding at about 10,000 or so a year. Throughout the visiting sessions, a continuing question was the state of the site. And we at a later point in the study, the city engaged an architectural and engineering team from Portland to do an evaluation of the site. Insofar as they were able to access the site on a one-day trip to the site, they made a number of discoveries and confirmed a number of things that we suspected. Buildings, and there are essentially, you can describe them sort of as 4 buildings on the site. It's the visitor center, the public toilets, the wagons, and I guess the hoods, the hoops would be 4, and the 5th one would be the name jumped out of my head. Where the storage is. So, and I'll come to that. So, the wagons make up the majority of the square footage of the buildings on the site. They were built as a temporary structure with an expected life of 10 to 15 years. And what does that mean? We've had some discussions about that. I guess the simple description of that would be, number one, the structure and code regulations of the building were up to code at that time. So it's not that they build a cheap building that's going to fall down and lacks meeting code regulations. The primary issues are the external construction. For example, the exterior cladding of the building is just single T111 siding over tar paper. Now, if that were constructed as a long-term building, it would have sheathing, tar paper or Tyvek, a siding that would. I'm not an architect, so I think I can only sort of say that would be the level of construction. The level of construction of the roof is similar, quick construction. The third one is the mechanical systems. For economical mechanical systems that are not specified for long term. So we're finding over the years, partly because of I would say lack of maintenance, but partly because of the quality of the construction, there's been some serious deterioration. And here you see some photographs of the rot and damage that has accumulated because of water damage and so on. There's some minor deficiencies of access, doors, sills, handrails, and so on, which don't meet contemporary code. Not a big deal, but and the interior is essentially in pretty good shape. And the visitor center and restroom building are both deemed to be in good condition. I guess the good news was the engineer's examination of the hoops, because there had been some concern expressed about their stability and about their ability to be preserved. Generally, and the engineers that looked at the hoops were the same engineers who specified them for the original construction, KPFF, and who are well-known Portland-based engineers. They've essentially determined that the damage to them is essentially a surface rust and can be repaired. So concerns the fifth building I was talking about, the carriage house, and there's some serious concerns about the carriage house, about the foundation and the stability of some of the fill under the carriage house. And indeed, that is probably a building that is in serious disrepair and probably needs to be torn down regardless, or needs major repairs. As I said, the mechanical systems are due for replacement. They cannot be repaired according to their mechanical engineering. The plumbing in the building is fine. It's working, and if there were major renovations or rehabilitations done to the building, unless there are design changes in the building, there would not have to be a lot of work done. Interior lighting is fine, but if you were to upgrade the building, you would upgrade it for contemporary energy efficiency. There's some serious damage to the concrete steps leading to the pre-show, to the visitor center. You see a photograph of the crack in that concrete. That really is suggesting to the engineers that those stairs need to be replaced. They're not repairable. The ramps, according to the engineers and architects, do not meet current ADA requirements, and the city would be at risk as owner of that property to potential action for not meeting contemporary ADA. The parking lots are fine. There's some minor heating there, and there's some minor issues of lighting and so on. We asked the architectural team to give us an estimate of what it would take to rehabilitate or demolish these buildings and what some of the options would be. So, at the top left there you see the cost of removing those buildings is about $150,000, and that would leave the site clean and clear of the buildings and the hoops. If we remove them but retain the hoops, it rises slightly by about $10,000 because there is the cost of renovating the hoops, essentially. And if one or more of the hoops were demolished, there would be some variations within that. But essentially, one of the things with the hoops is that they are structurally, the concrete under the hoops is part of the structural strength of them, so that the concrete pad would have to remain if the hoops were removed. A renovation estimate just for the buildings was about $1.3 million. And that assumes removing the carriage house and restoring the wagons and hoops without the covering on the hoops. That would be another order of magnitude because we're not sure that the hoops, the covering that was on the hoops was a very lightweight, short-lived covering. If it were to be redone, there are some new materials that are heavier and longer lasting. Whether the hoops would be able to support them is the question.
No question?
Bob, did I just hear you say that the $1.256 million does not include any covering for the hoops? No.
And we don't know what that cost would be because they've taken more detailed structural analysis of the hoops to put a modern covering on that. It was a very lightweight covering, I understand, and of course it didn't stand up to the weather and rain. Those costs are tentative, and they are for construction, and they don't include fees, which probably add between 10 and 20%, various plan check, taxes, testing, and so on. if there are hazardous materials there, which we don't believe there are. There was no indication of any hazardous materials in the buildings, so that this is just a caveat. And it assumes a start next spring. And so if there were a later start, there would be some inflation, although that's not a great big deal these days. The next thing we did was look at some comparable interpretive centers, and the task force asked us to look at some. We developed some comparables, both Oregon Trail sites and other trail sites, and some very big sites in Williamsburg and Silver Dollar City and Branson, Missouri, and so on. Just looking at these, and there's details in the report. I guess the big finding for us is that the interpretive sites for the Oregon Trail essentially are all supported by outside funds. Tribal, federal, Forest Service, BLM, National Parks, Department of Agriculture, all support the Dalles, the Baker Cities, the Pendleton, end of the trail sites, and the other ones we looked at in our examination. So that was a big finding for us, is that none of them is a local site. And I guess my observation at that point was, well, gee, what happened to Oregon City? Why didn't it get on that? And in fact, Oregon City, as I am given to understand, got a fairly substantial grant to build it, but didn't get the grant to operate it that the others did. That was a big aha for us in terms of these sites. The second is that they are very diverse, that they do local programming, they do changing exhibits, they do events, they have local volunteer programs, and essentially are serving both visitors and local markets. There's classes. I was at the Pendleton site a couple of weeks ago, and there were classes and school tours going on, and lectures and events, which is pretty typical of what's being done at the centers, and was not so different from what was being done here in many of the years it was running. They all experienced very low local visitation despite their efforts to have events and activities. Pendleton, for example, has both a local history museum and the Oregon Trail Center, or the Tribal Museum, which is some miles out of town. The local history museum is essentially a local audience, and the Tribal Museum is essentially a visitor audience. I mentioned the subsidies, and in our sort of discussions with them about their development costs and some of the newer ones, and with the National Park Service and State Historic Interpretive Parks folks, they're saying that a turnkey interpretive center today is approximately $1,000 a square foot, which is kind of a shocking number, but that includes all costs for site development, parking, architecture and engineering fees, exhibits, which can be $300 a foot or more, and the building. So that these things are very expensive. So, a 10,000 square foot interpretive center is a $10 million project today. So we go to the meat of our recommendations. And the process that we went through here is working with the task force to define what was success. What would a successful end of the Oregon Trail site look like? The second question was, what is your vision? What would you envision it to be in the future? And the third question was, well, given that vision of success and the vision for the site, what are our program options, and how do we look at those and evaluate them? So essentially, we boiled it down to a vision which is an authentic, sustainable community place. The task force told us, and you'll see a series of sequences here. This is what the task force told us in our meeting, that it would protect our heritage. It would be an historical tourist destination. It would be a gateway to other attractions. It would interpret our native community, and so on and so forth. Stories of our cultural change. These are actually quotes from our task force meeting, which we boiled down sort of the question of authenticity. That it really wants to be a site that is relevant to the stories of the end of the Oregon Trail. The next level of discussion said, well, what are some of the other things? It wants to be multiple uses. It wants to be sustainable. It wants to be experiential. It wants to create employment. It wants to be visible and findable. It wants to stimulate and stimulate the visitor and be interactive. We sort of boiled this down to it's sustainable. It's a place that can exist with its programs and is financially sustainable. The next set of success criteria were that it should be collaborative, it should relate well with its neighbors, that it should fit in with the community, and that it should improve, at the end of the day, improve the quality of life of Oregon City. And we say that this is essentially community. So we boiled this down to these three sort of sets of visions, if you will. Authentic, that it's fact-based, that it's relevant, and it's unique. Sustainable, that it's attractive to diverse markets. It operates with available resources. It accommodates multiple uses. And a place for the community, for gathering. And it engages and serves the community. And it's a springboard or a gateway to Oregon City and Clackamas heritage. Given that vision, we went through an exercise, sort of how would we evaluate programs? And the task force gave us, in the brainstorm session, a series of sort of criteria that we began to boil down into some set of criteria that we could evaluate these 21 programs that were being put forward. So questions of operating cost, income potential, visibility, the neighborhood fit, parking needs, pedestrian access. We boiled these down to 5 different categories for evaluation. Does it meet the vision? What's your reaction? What's your emotional reaction to this program? What about transportation and parking? Can it fit the site? Does it fit with the neighborhood? Does it fit with the traffic? Can it accommodate the parking needs? The question of context, does it fit with the surrounding neighborhood? Are there nearby amenities? And as you know, the site has many challenges in terms of its nearby amenities, but we wanted to make sure that it would fit and fit with downtown and fit with the rest of Oregon City. The site is 8 acres, which is not a very big site. So some of the program proposals we had were for very large developments, which immediately disqualified them unless there was the acquisition of additional property. The market and economic criteria, is it affordable? Is there funding potential? Can it be sustained on an operating basis? Is it unique or is it duplicative of other activities? And our last one we added is expediency. I think this is important because something needs to be done soon. The site is sitting there and there's something that needs to be done to keep it alive for the future. Well, we went through an evaluation of these 21 programs that were proposed. And in the report, we detailed each of these and described where they came from and what they were. And these are in order of a ranking. You see across the top there, the vision, transportation, context, capacity, the economic sustainability, and the expediency. And this is an evaluation that we gave as a 1, 0, or a -1, whether it met it or it was neutral or it failed to meet the criteria. And there are a handful of them which boil to the top. Clearly, the Destination Visitor Center, interpretive displays, the proposal for the model steam train, which has been put forward by a business who wants to develop a small miniature train on the site, ranked very high according to these criteria, and there's no weighting on any of these criteria so that they're all given equal value. Yes, sir.
One thing that struck me about this table was one thing that struck me about this table is the context used for everything is, well, I guess you do have a positive one, but most of the things were 0 and negative ones. Yeah, I guess I didn't know exactly what context meant.
I'll go back to the fit of the surrounding neighborhood and are there amenities there? I think that it's kind of a construct, if you will, because, as you know, the neighborhood does not have a great deal of amenities which support this. Amtrak site being a notable exception. and some of the possible future developments could be important contributors to improving that neighborhood. So, in a sense, trying to evaluate that, does it fit the farmers market in terms of context? We gave it a negative in terms of it's not. It just doesn't fit in the idea of going to a farmer's market next to a recycle center, I guess. It was an attempt by us to sort of prioritize these, and I don't think it actually excludes any of them because there's different scales to each. So, for example, bicycle rental, that's a 50 square foot use of the site and would be a great sort of amenity if there were visitors going there and wanted to rent bicycles to travel around down to downtown and so on. So that it comes lower down the list is not really a concern to us. It's sort of the big picture things and sort of the emotional feeling of the site as a place for visitors and a place for festivals and events kind of percolated to the top for us. And that tension between local and visitor was important and a continuing theme. Here you see, this is the rest of the 21 animal displays. Of course, it's been done there. Ball fields came up again, and some of the ideas around period dining or costume interpretation, and a research library and a museum, which I should note that we ranked the research library museum low in our report, primarily because of the fact that it's a floodplain. So that storing any artifacts or documents on a floodplain, while it can be done, it would require a major expenditure. So it really didn't fit very well. The baseball stadium came down very low, primarily because of the vision question and the transportation and parking. This is stadium, not ball fields. This is big stadium.
If I could interject, I think our discussion at the task force level was that with some exceptions like a baseball stadium, all these are single uses, and we are, I think, very interested in multiple uses, which is, I think, where you're going next.
This is exactly where we go. Thank you. We put together a sort of a program, a program which can be developed over time. Our intent here in helping the task force envision this is that it's very clear that many on the task force and many in the community would like to see it done over again, but done right and done better. I think that's kind of the bottom line. Bottom line, though, is as we looked at these interpretive centers, is something that's a very expensive proposition, and that the resources are not there today that we know of, but could be there tomorrow, or the next day, or the next year, or 10 years from now. So the goal in developing this was to put together a plan which would start slow, preserve the site, and build according to available resources. And there are three basic components to this. There's the visitor center, there's a heritage park component which takes in the interpretive and the story of the Oregon Trail, and there's an on-site activity and programs component which takes into account the community's interest in having a changing and dynamic place. So each of these components has various levels of development depending on available resources, will, commitment of the community, fundraising, and so on. Every one of these components is physically possible on this site. So that as in a 20-year development plan, for example, a major interpretive center could be recreated on that site. However, we start off slow. In the visitor center, we envision essentially operating the visitor center as it is today, and that it could gradually grow to develop a dedicated exhibit. It could grow to develop a Taste of Clackamas County, again, depending on available resources. The building is able to accommodate every one of those at a certain level. The building is large enough to have an exhibit and to have a small taste of exhibit as well and serving the visitors. Component two is the Heritage Park. We see a beginning of the redevelopment of this site as a refurbishment and a redesign of the existing signs and the trail, the walking trail on the site as a self-guided interpretive experience. So this is a very modest investment in both capital and in staffing, and done well and done properly. And I think Fort Vancouver has a very fine interpretive trail, self-interpretive trail with very high quality signage, very durable, graffiti-proof, and would be an attraction for a visitor. Next level may take, and these are not really mutually exclusive. The next level could add some facilities for living history interpretation, and ultimately maybe a new National Parks Interpretive Center. There's discussion, of course, of the Clackamas Heritage Area, and perhaps potential to create this as the gateway for the National Heritage Area that is being discussed. A third component is facilities for festivals and events, which really require power, water, public toilets, and some kind of cover. And that can take many forms. Essentially, the greensward on the site now is suitable for small-scale events with some minor adjustments and maintenance to the site. It could accommodate small events. Adding facilities such as a concert shell or a small stage or an acoustic shell and some support spaces, dressing rooms and change rooms and performer toilets could turn this into a more elaborate performance space, probably accommodating 2,000 to 3,000 for a concert or a small theatrical event. The resource requirements that we've identified for these is essentially our challenge was to sort of come up with order of magnitude resource requirements and kind of operations pictures for this. Essentially, the visitor center, as I said, would operate more or less as it is today with staff and volunteer help, and could be geared up as available resources emerge. The Heritage Park, we would suggest that the volunteer heritage garden be maintained, and it seems to work well. It's very low cost. If there were living history and the signage program, the trail program would just basically be a maintenance, public works maintenance cost. If there were volunteer activities done by living history performers, it would require some staff time, staff coordination. And if there were more elaborate interpretive programs, it requires kind of a park ranger staff to guide visitors through the interpretive program. Similarly, the level of development for the activities is essentially at the lowest level, the greensward would be improved and it would be put up for rent. At the next level, the city may want to engage in some kind of encouragement or hosting of activities that could happen there. And this could take some staff time or a contractor to book shows and so on. And then the next level, of course, gets into much more elaborate programming. That would call for more resources. But at what we'll call the A level there is essentially no additional operating costs to the bare maintenance of the site, and that funds are currently available to support. So annual operating costs at the very bottom of the scale for the visitor center is $60,000 to $75,000, which I believe the county is now $60,000 a year into the visitor center, which the city pays for the maintenance and operation of the building. So essentially that could continue and could grow slightly. But if it were to incorporate exhibits and a taste of it, the costs would rise probably the order of about $150,000 a year for staff and increased operating costs. For the Heritage Park, there's for the sign maintenance and maintenance of the trail and so on, the costs would be essentially minimal, piggybacked on the city's park and recreation maintenance. And at the far end of the scale, with the Heritage Park and Interpretive Center, our analysis says that we're talking about an $800,000 to a $1 million operation for a basic interpretive center along the lines of, say, Baker City or Cincinnati Dallas. They're sort of in that ballpark. Again, the activities and programs, the greensward, were just put up for rent. There's a minimal operating cost of that, and then the sky's the limit if you get into the performing arts business. So we tried to put together some advice for the commission here as to what the next steps might be. Clearly, the museum buildings and the hoops the condition of those needs to be addressed. So that's a question of mothballing them, removing them, rehabilitating them along the lines of some of these program ideas. Decision on the visitor center, of course, an ongoing agreement with the county for the ongoing funding of that, and some kind of agreement as to management of it. It's currently under the management of CHP, and whether that would remain in place is a question. In terms of the overall site development, who should take responsibility for that? It could be contracted, it could be done within the city. Questions about the interpretive approach would have to be in the Heritage Park. We would have to retain an interpretive consultant and write the text and create the panels and so on, and then get into the programming business if resources are available. I think I've tried to capture pretty much what the community has told us. As I said, the bottom line for the community is they would like to see it developed in a multi-use site to serve both community uses and visitor uses. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or receive any comments that I should have.
We have now 20 minutes for discussion, so I want to make sure that we, since I don't believe we get to see you again, this is your last presentation, so
yes, it is.
Make any decisions while we'll be on our own. So
there's always the phone.
Yes, that's of course. Right.
I promise to not take more than 20. Okay, so I'm going to go through this slow, because sometimes when I am knowledgeable of a topic and connected to a place personally, I tend to get really frustrated. It was very clear that I wasn't happy about the Carnegie process. I was less happy about this one. So I have a couple of questions to start off, and then some comments. First of all, the facilities report from THA. When were they on the site, and when was their report submitted? Was that before or after the second task force meeting?
It was written by the city after the second task force meeting.
Okay. That raises a huge flag to me and in this whole process. And why I say that is I truly believe that the task force was an incredible group of people. Extremely knowledgeable on Oregon City, its history, have a deep passion for this community and this site. At the second task force meeting, which I didn't attend, I was out of town, but I did watch it on videotape. The task force was told that the buildings needed to be demolished. And the reaction from the task force was so quiet, and I think Alex mentioned it as the air just going out of the room. That stopped all process, and I mean, that really was a focal point in where the second task force meeting really should have been about where are we going and what is the future of the site. It was so interrupted by that decision or that comment that I think it totally derailed the effectiveness of what that group really had to bring. And to find out that the report from the architects didn't happen until after that, and to find out that the architects said the buildings are fine structurally. Now, of course, they have some work. That really bothers me, because now you're coming to us tonight saying they're structurally sound for the most part. That really caused a huge problem, and I think it really affected the outcome of this report. and the effectiveness of what that task force could have really brought to us. I want to go on to say in the comments about the building is we can argue whether or not the buildings were supposed to be there for 10 years, 5 years, or what. But the interesting point is the building that we think is the worst is the newest, which was built there to be there forever, not temporary. So the temporary buildings, temporary. We know that the site was never planned to be there that long, but those buildings were built better than the new buildings, with the exception of the visitor center. So, we have some work to do on the buildings, but what building in Oregon City do we not have work to do? I think about the fact that, it's going to cost us $1 million to fix this building. So we just might as well tear it down. Well, you know what? It was going to take $700,000 to fix the Ermatinger house 7 years ago. So are we going to knock that down? How much money do we think that we need to fix the swimming pool? Are we going to knock that down? No, we're not. We're not even going to mention it. And the fact that that was mentioned, I think, is a real disservice, and I can't believe we paid for that. The other things I want to say is with the debate. We can debate that all we want, but when you show the pictures, every time you show pictures of the architect's pictures about that building, you're showing pictures of the bottom 3 feet of the building. That was underwater. So a lot of that damage to that building has nothing to do with the original construction. It has to do with the fact that the HVAC units were sitting underwater, that the bottom, almost all these refer to the bottom couple feet of the walls and the structure. That was underwater, 3 feet of water, that building. So I think you're forgetting that as an element. A lot more has happened to that building than just the fact that it wasn't supposed to last. I was disappointed by the survey. I think that not only did the task force have amazing dreams and still do for what this site can be, I think so does the community. And to throw a survey out there to ask the community, what are the 2 uses that you want for this building, or the 3 uses for what you want for this building? You know what? That's not fair. I want more than 2 uses for the building. I want 10 uses for the building. I don't want any limit to what we can use that site for. Because any limit to what we can use that site for limits the potential of it being successful. So how did we do that? That wasn't asking the community for their input. That was saying, here's some options, tell us what you think, and we'll kind of narrow it out. The other thing, don't cut me off. The other thing is this. We talked about this as being the crucial part of this was that this building needs to be sustainable. So what are the recommendations now for programs? We're going to take an event site and we're going to make it an event site. We're going to take a visitor center and we're going to make it a visitor center. And we're going to take a heritage park and make it a heritage park. It's the same uses that we've always used it for. Those 3 uses. There's nothing there that's new. That wasn't sustainable. So what makes us think that this time is going to be? Management obviously was an issue, so we can fix that. But it's not sustainable. And the other thing is, none of the program offerings mention anything about the wedding buildings because you assumed we were going to tear them down. We're not. There's no way they're structurally sound. So now we've paid for a study where we were told we're going to tear these buildings down, and we have no program offerings for the entire site, which is what we hired you to do, was to facilitate a process to evaluate the entire site. You didn't do that because you got no program offerings for 3 of the buildings on that site. Because you wanted to tear them down. Well, guess what? They're fine. They're structurally. So what are we, now tell me, what should we do with those buildings? And what is what are we going to have to do now to make sure that this is sustainable? And we go, we're at the same place we were when we hired you. I mean, we should have just we should have listened to the task force. We could have formed a task force as a city, did just as well. We could have asked the community what they thought and came up with the greatest solution. I have so many ideas in my head to what to do with this, I can't even stop talking about it. So does everyone in this room. But we come up with 3 solutions that we've been sitting with for 15 years that didn't work. You could do better than that. We can do better than that as a city. And I'm again, I don't know how many times I've said this in 2 years. Again, I'm horribly embarrassed.
Let's allow for some response.
I appreciate what you're saying, and the challenge of this project is really, not the sustainabilities of the building or the capital investments. Sustainability as an ongoing operation. Our research into the interpretive centers throughout the country that we looked at said $500,000 to $1 million a year is what the subsidy requirement is. We're very conscious of that in a city of 30,000 people. Where is that money to come from? And it was not apparent from us that the money was available at the $500,000 to $1 million a year operating cost. Now, some could say, oh, I can do it for less. We can run it with volunteers. We can contract it out and they can raise the money for it. Well, that's certainly a possibility, and it is not precluded in this plan that we put forward. $1.5 million to rehabilitate those buildings and a secure source of funding to support it at the $500,000 to $1 million a year, and we haven't done the feasibility study for that, nor were we charged to. At the $500,000 to $1 million a year to run them would fit within this framework perfectly. What we're saying is we really want to start, we don't want to preclude going forward with what is possible, but I think we've got to be responsible. As your consultants, we are taking some responsibility to not tell you to undertake a program that we don't believe the funding is available for. And that, you might find $1.5 million to rehabilitate the buildings, but I'm not sure the money, the $500,000 to $1 million a year to run that center is available.
We only have 10 more minutes. Can we have one more time? Okay.
And, again, we have the same situation with all the buildings in the city. We're not closing. We're making them work as best we can. The fact is the buildings aren't condemned. They can be used. We can use them for whatever we want. But we have no plan for what to use them for. And we still, that was part of this process. And we still don't have a plan. I think you missed a huge piece of your job, huge piece of your work. And I think it's really unfortunate.
If I could just interject here. I appreciate your work. The fact that you did 40 surveys throughout the community, you have a pretty comprehensive list of what you heard. And I think you were tasked to do what you did, to look at comparables. And I think obviously the big thing is that we're the only one you found that isn't subsidized. And it seems to me that because we have 3 closed facilities, that this report and the report from the consultants at Museum of the Oregon Territory and the Carnegie Task Force in the future ought to be drawn together. I think there needs to be a community response that talks about all of those, because this report isn't that different from the other 2. Requires subsidy. They're too large. The programs aren't sustainable. They're very volunteer dependent, and maintenance is neglected. So it seems to me that the future is going to be another process. where perhaps we come up with a very creative reconfiguration of the activities or new activities that happen in those facilities. And I think people from those facilities are also willing to have that conversation. So for me, this is a good summary of the maintenance issues, the summary of the community response and comparable facilities. Maybe there isn't anything new under the sun, because what you've given us is, I think, can meet some of your needs also. If it has three components that can be configured. I think the only thing that you didn't come up with that is a piece, but the task force wasn't really interested in the commercial component of it, and you don't have that. And I think that's the only piece that's really, it's not prohibited because you can do whatever you want, but that's the piece that I see that's missing. And again, without a pot of money to do it with, it's very, very difficult. I think we understood that from the beginning. So others, because we only have 5 minutes left on this particular topic. Doug.
I guess one thing that I'd like to see, and it probably ties more to the visitor center than it does the others, is it's not only a destination, it's also a gateway. The reason this area got sold largely in Oregon City, of course, was the falls and energy generation and the possibility of doing things there. But the reason the settlers came was because of that, the soft flow that resulted in these deep fertile soils in the south of Oregon City, where the people went to see what they were farming. It seems to me we have to have that gateway piece in there. You talk about case of Clackamas County. I really look at it as an indication of where to go to see in Willamette Valley what happened. I mean, it's certainly more than Clackamas County, although the fact is, has in terms of dollars to put in there. And some of that initially could be probably dealt with photographs, I don't know, tourism agricultural sites and so forth, or maybe indications of that's how you get there. But I would like to see that component in there as well.
I think that's really what Taste of Clackamas County was.
Yeah.
As we discussed it in the task force, this was a place to begin an exploration of other places as a satellite system.
Yes. A couple of terms that have thrown around tonight: context and authenticity and sustainability. And I want to use those words to bring up another word that was used earlier tonight, is the big elephant in the room, which is here sitting amidst us that no one's mentioned. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Talking about a big box retail mall that would be adjacent to this site and this project. And it seems that may have been enough of a third rail discussion where I don't see it in this report. And I can't think of anything more conceptually dissonant than thinking about this project is authentic and sustainable, and a big box retail project that to me embodies unsustainability and lack of authenticity. And I guess I just want to get your advice on how you propose that we, moving forward with this, have that conversation.
It's a community vision, community planning issue, and indeed the site is there's a tension here. That site is what it is, and well, it hasn't got the ruts that Baker City has. It is what it is, and it's authentic, and it's the real thing, and that has an emotional response to the local community and the visitor that is really important to preserve. Now, maybe it's a simple design issue. It was an elephant in our room as well as we were doing our work, and I think the elephant is beginning to stick his trunk out of the door, whatever the metaphor is. Maybe it's a design issue. I think that it can be mitigated in part, but the accessibility of the site is tremendous. It has a visibility from 2 significant freeways. So
You know, my advice would be very, very careful urban planning and design, and that's all I can say. There are big boxes, and there are big boxes. And I just want to say one more thing, if I may, Madam Mayor. I guess the easiest thing for us to do in a project would be to say, do it over again, but do it right. And clearly rebuild the buildings for $1.5 million, refurbish the exhibits for perhaps another $500,000 if they were to be done, or $1 million as much as they could be, and reopen it and find $500,000 or $1 million a year to run it. That would be, we could write that plan in a minute, and it would sit on the shelf. And I wanted to, in my consulting work with you and throughout my consulting career, I've tried to work the art as possible. And I think that to say that we have said the building should be demolished is not correct. We're saying that the buildings need serious refurbishment.
Now, you're saying you were saying that, but that's not what you said, right?
Well, I'd have to check the record, but I won't. This is not the place to debate what may have been said. The numbers are in, and you could, if you found the money, follow this plan that is here, and complete what you set out to do. But if the money's not there, there's a stepwise way to get there. And maybe the immediate decision is to mothball the buildings, to protect them, stabilize them, protect them from vandalism, and proceed with the plan in the light of the future potential rehabilitation and redevelopment of those buildings. That is certainly within this plan. And for us, we don't want to kill the spirit of this community that wants to interpret and wants to tell the story of the Oregon Trail and the story of Oregon City. And hopefully we can set the stage for that through the implementation of this plan. And that would be my recommendation at the end of the day, is start off with what you can do now and with the idea of what you may want to do in the future. And if that includes mothballing the buildings, that's fine. And the best news we got out of this is the hoops that we thought were unstable, and we're told were unstable when we started this work. They are stable and can be preserved. Whether they can be covered or not is a question, but certainly they can be preserved as an icon. As I fly into Portland and I look out that window of the plane, it's the icon of Oregon City. You can see them when you come in. And it's important.
And I like the fact that you said at one of the meetings, I don't think it's really in the report, that even if they were taken down, when you did talk about taking the buildings down, I think you were talking about that's only one extreme.
If you were laying on the ground, you'd still be able to see them from an airplane.
Yeah, there you go. But to turn them into an artistic structure of some kind, I like that idea. But I think I'd like to end on one positive note, in that this is a wonderful asset that the community has. I'm always filled with pride when I go through and see the way that the structures are configured, and the Oregon Trail Foundation and CHP that followed it, my research partners, worked all these years to keep visitors coming, and it really had more visitors than any other site, I think, besides the waterfall, which is free, to walk through in Oregon City, and it really did put us on the map and brought our heritage community to a higher level. So we still have that asset. The visitor center is still open and perking a little, but you know what? The message I'm hearing loud and clear, and none of us are refuting it, is that we ain't going to do much else without money. And again, I like big, bold dreams, and if you have it, this is really a big, bold dream, because it is phased, and it's sort of a gradual run. It seems like it's always easier to find money to build something big and bold, but then to operate it, it's always going slow. So it's a dilemma, and I'm not sure you came up. I think you came up with a workable solution. perhaps perhaps as part of me also was disappointed that you didn't put together something that really would work. If this piece goes here, this piece goes here, if you only did this piece over here, we would have something that would sustain itself and bring in visitors. But we may have to scale back our dreams until we. Again, I think that the reconfiguration of all of this is going to be part of the key step. But it's just me. If there are any final comments before we go, Daphne.
Well, thank you for all your hard work. And did I miss the summary page of the costs of this, you're doing this?
Yeah, it's accurate.
Okay, then I missed it. I was thinking of, a little bit of what everybody said, that here we are kind of in the same spot again. And I kind of think sometimes we as a community, we get in our own way. And here we had a task force, but really they didn't want to change anything. And the way we were doing it was unsustainable. So, I'm going to list my neck out here. So, let's say, Commissioner Seed is talking about, a mall, and I can see the juxtaposition with the, new and phony or not a real, with an authentic heritage site, but in some ways with perhaps urban design and with the tax increment from the mall in the urban renewal district, it might be able to help us fund some of those improvements. So I don't quite see it the same way there.
I would think that some of the people coming to the mall, many thousands of visitors, they want an authentic experience.
Well, I think you directed your point on that particular point to a specific thing, and that is an appropriate design, urban design process. One way you do that is through private, public partnerships, and one way you can do that is perhaps using urban renewal dollars and design centers to make sure that kind of thing happens. Of course, alternatively, we could turn it into a fantasy record.
As I remember, the public plaza in one of the renditions of an earlier, as we looked at the Rivers development, was historic, bringing in art and history and also incorporating at one time the interpretive center within it. That was also, exactly what we were. I don't think that's necessarily off the table. But that also was a place that directed people to other places in the community or other places up downriver. So, that may still be out there. Any other final words or comments? Yes, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make one quick comment. I don't want to leave Bob sitting on an island on an issue. It's going back a little bit, but just to clarify something about the process. The city engaged the architect services following the recommendation of Bob and his company, based on the input we got from the task force. It wasn't, and frankly, we took our time to make sure that we really needed to do that because it was an investment that we had to make outside the scope of the original consultant project. So we asked our own city building staff to take a look. We kind of had to wait for that analysis, and then we needed to determine whether we had enough information. We went back and forth. Just in Bob's defense, they recommended strongly that we get this architect survey done probably sooner than we did, and we were just being diligent about spending the city's money and whether we needed to do that. So that's just more of a process issue, but I just didn't want Bob to sit out on that island by himself about that process question.
Well, as I recall, the task force meetings too, after the recommendation was that maybe they ought to all be torn down. There was such pushback by many people in the task force saying, is that true? How do you know? And so
and I think partly what probably some of the discussion about that happened here tonight was based on assumptions that they were given from different sources, and I think they were getting a lot of different information, and until we had the opportunity to have an architectural and engineering firm verify that information, which didn't happen until I just looked at my calendar while we were talking here. I met with them on site to give them a tour. It wasn't until mid-September, and again, that was kind of based on we probably really have to validate what the questions are here. So I just want to make sure that that you, the commission, understood that was as much on us as it was anybody else. But only simply because we were just being careful about spending the city's money.
Okay. I'm glad we went through with the architect. I'm glad they looked at it. I have no problem with that. And it wasn't city staff saying to tear the buildings down. So you don't make a bold statement like that to a group without. You don't do that based on just complete assumptions, which is what happened.
I guess I'd like to actually check in this process. We've just received a report. We've had an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. I don't know whether we want. I see that we have task force members here. We haven't really allowed time for that kind of comment, so I don't know if we want to schedule it at a time or you want to.
We had another activity planned for tonight anyway, and so I don't have any problem saying listen.
We're going to have to take some task force member input this evening, Ben. Okay, if you come up and then if you could hold your comments to 3 minutes, well, that'd be great. So, even though it's a work session, introduce yourself as usual. So, John, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor. John Salisbury, 120 Torrington Drive.
Live in Oregon City.
Live in Oregon City. My question is, now what? Very simple. We got information. Does it sit up on top of a shelf someplace? Is it buried? Right. We go forward. We take some of the pieces and develop it. We just say, let it be. That's my only thing. And I believe that's under 3 minutes of your record.
Yes, perfect. Yes, I think we don't know yet, and that's probably where we have to have another discussion. I don't think any of us have an idea for that yet. Anybody else? Okay, come on up.
If I may, William Gifford, live in Oregon City. The thought occurs to me that I'm going to suggest something, and everybody's going to say, "Oh yeah, sure, naturally, of course, yeah." But I don't know that there's really given a lot of thought has been given to incremental implementation, starting off very, very small, building on a success, and then using that as a generator for the next step. And I haven't heard of a phased implementation, not of any plan.
That's exactly what the report suggests.
I'm suggesting even smaller than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and as I suspected, everybody was, oh yeah, sure, and that's what you said. But I'm suggesting, even if it was a bake sale, there would be some, that was feasible, that was facetious. But to use the buildings in some small capacity to generate income, to generate interest, to generate some momentum, and to generate some success, instead of having a major phase and then trying to implement that. I'm saying start smart and start small.
Okay, thank you. Likely anything we do will either require allowing another organization to do it or staff. So that's one of the hurdles that I have to get over in my mind anyway. If anyone else wants to speak, please come forward. Is anyone following this? Okay.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you for bringing us together again. On this one street, we're with ISIS, and we're presenting a little dream. And I appreciate your report. It's so similar to the last one that it's like Rocky said. We want to put together the implementation of the top 3 categories we were recommending over the top, which includes the training, which includes the use of the buildings, and includes the facilities and an amphitheater. All 3. So, and we're prepared to fund it and bring the money to the city and implement all of it at once. So, I don't see why we have a problem here. It just seems like unless everybody's happy, nothing's going to get done. If a private business can come in and say we can solve all your problems, we want to do it so it's sustainable. We don't have to have handouts. We don't have to require people for donations or. The business itself will operate and run itself, and it'll give a percentage back to the city, and the whole community can benefit from it. We're prepared to implement. We brought in a company, it's called Apogee, and they've done probably 100 projects over the country, like Epcot Center, Kennedy Space Center, top attractions, where we want them to come in and design and do a scientific study of the site and recommend which exhibits are going to work. And following that master plan, we come in and build exhibits, put the train, and so basically everything gets funded after their study of a successful analysis of, a little nervous, I'm sorry, but an analysis of successful projects that have been done across the country. Now, that's not what we got here. We have the same, we're recommending we do the same thing that has been failure from the beginning. The first report last year was really similar.
I think we didn't have another report.
Yes, but if we can put something like that together, where we use existing buildings, we use existing property, and corporate and private businesses interject the money to do it, where we don't have to raise money, and it's not going to. I hope you see what I'm.
No, I think we do. Yeah. We have a little bit of that in our task force report. I believe, if I'm interpreting correctly, that the task force didn't urge a large commercial component at this point. I mean, we have an opportunity to take this for anything here, but right now, nothing's necessarily off the table. We haven't chosen our path. We haven't chosen our next step. So,
and I think leave that still as an option, where a company can come in like ourselves and fund the whole project, and the city reaps the rewards of successful adventures or programs that have worked across the country. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's the last speaker. Okay.
Hi, Patty, Oregon City. I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of the end, is what I'm hoping. If you have not gotten your letter yet, you will be. It was sent out today. This is for the Oregon City Tourism Gathering. I'm just going to read a little bit. This is for October 28th. The purpose of this gathering is to redefine and begin to create what will become our mission for visitors. The state and county encourage 6 words to be included in our efforts. These are enhance, experience, authenticity, connections, and visitor/tourism. Please bring paper, pen, pencil, idea, and suggestions. Our city manager, David Frazier, will join us with a challenge presentation. This meeting is open to all and is on the city calendar, or hopefully soon will be, for public meetings.
How does it to this project?
Pardon? It is tourism, and what this is brainstorming. It is bringing all of us together that have been asking to be brought together for a long, long time. We're playing the same old song, but hopefully it's a new last verse that we'll be able to start brainstorming ideas, all of these ideas that have been put out there, and then take those ideas and start developing and start putting them to work. So we have to brainstorm, but the bottom line of this is that it is, I almost hate to use the word grassroots these days, but that's what it is. It's building from the foundation up. Start simple, build, take our ideas and let the citizens develop what this vision and carry out what this is going to be. October 28th, 7 to 9 o'clock at the Thank you. I love that at that one. And it's essential that as many of us that can are there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Megan, this will be your last week, but we need to take a break and then move on to our next topic. Great, come on.
My name is Megan Burt. I'm actually an employee of CHP. I work at the Visitor Center and was the education coordinator at the Interfaith Center. And I just wanted to leave you with one final thought. At the Visitor Center, we have the unique experience of telling the hundreds of people who come to that site on a monthly basis that we are closed, the Interfaith Center is closed, and it's heartbreaking, and it's kind of like reliving the whole experience every day. And it's also very frustrating for our visitors. So I guess I would just ask that I know that there's no money, and I know that there's no immediate solution to this problem. But as you analyze it and come up with some possible alternatives, that you remember the visitors that are coming on a regular basis who are very disappointed, and the fact that you have such a great story to tell. So if you cannot put it on the shelf for a really sustained period, I think it would make a lot of people really happy. And thank you for the time you've taken to consider.
But your question was an indication that actually the visitors serve, as I've been clearly stated, maybe in terms of the visitations, where it hasn't not served in the case of the others. Did you have an explanation?
Our numbers are actually up from last year, but a lot of those people are people who are coming for the interpretive center. And the cool thing is they come and they're disappointed at first, but we've moved a lot of exhibits into the space, and we have people there who can interpret for them. We've created a lot of hands-on activities. So while they might be unhappy when they arrive, they're usually pretty happy when they leave. And there are so many great places to send them to in our community and our county that we usually feel like we've given them a good experience. So that's the plus side. But the plus side is they can see those buildings and they know what they've missed.
If you haven't been to the Visitor Center recently, I encourage you to go. They've just done a great job bringing things in to make it interesting and compelling. And I think the staff there is very friendly. And now and then you have almost special music or something too. So, okay, thank you. We will obviously have to put this on the next agenda for next steps. So we will let's come back in 5 minutes to continue with South Fork Water. The loan that we facilitated with South Fork Water Board. So who's leading off on this?
Well, I'll start out briefly. I got the pros here.
It's the A-team. Okay.
Anyway, Mayor and Commissioners, what we have before you again is talking to me about the South Fork interest from South Fork loan that we made. As you recall, we budgeted the loan $2.4 million from the city to South Fork in order to pay off their bondholders and get them out from under the bond covenants they had to do, save them a few hundred, about $100,000 to $150,000 after paying us interest. And anyway, all that happened like the first week of July. It all went perfectly. The bondholders got paid off. We got the money set aside that we couldn't pay it off the bondholders and put it into a trust to defease them, and this just worked out very well. Now we have a $2,282,000 loan instead of 2.4, which was set up for 7 years. And in your stuff there, I have the allocation of what South Fork, the schedule looks like this. Anyway, it shows on the top there what South Fork will be paying Oregon City over the next 7 years at 3.5% interest.
And in the middle of the page shows what the general fund and the approved rate fund would receive if it was like a normal transaction, like normally when you borrow money from somebody, you pay them back with interest at whatever the agreed upon rate is. But we're going to do a little twist on that. We'll give them some interest, but not give them all the interest. But my thought is that the two funds that loan the money should at least get not be jeopardized and receive a lower rate than they would have received if they would not have made the loans. And the current market rate is 0.55%. And so this, assuming that rate's going to stay in effect for the next 7 years, and the difference between the 0.55 and the 3.5% we would use for other things, and that difference is on the lower right-hand corner there. Assuming these same rates, the total for the 7 years is like $257,000. And so where Scott and Nancy come in is have some possible ideas how to use that money. And I think they come up with some good ideas, and I think we break it down by year, and it would turn out to be like $60,000 for the first 2 years, and $50,000 for the third, $40,000 for the fourth, and 30 and 20. But anyway, the first year is pretty clear, I think, and some really good ideas. But then after that, we may want to just sort of wait and think about that down the road, how we want to do it. We want to use it, as Nancy suggests, or for some other reasons. So anyway, I took a lot of time there explaining the first paragraph and so on. We're going to turn it over. The next 3 paragraphs are basically Nancy and then one of Scott, and it's sort of combined later on. So whichever one of you guys want to go through.
So I'm going to talk about the recommendation regarding the Carnegie Spray Park and the use of these funds. We, in conjunction with this discussion previously, the idea of doing something with the Carnegie Spray Park was brought up, and then of course we had the timely discussion from this past summer. You know what our issue was there with having to close that down because of some liability and repair issues. So what I've done is put together a couple of paragraphs in your recommendation that talk about the repairs that we need. I've basically kind of re-explained that. We've estimated the repair at about $40,000. I would call it repair and renovation, actually. And what we're recommending is that we proceed with repair and renovation of the Carnegie Spray Park in basically its existing form, with the objective of reopening the facility by this coming summer season of 2011. In order to do this, we need to move forward very, very soon. It's a timeliness issue because we have some design issues, we have permitting issues, things like working through the HRB process. We also have to work with the state within some state health department rules and some things of that nature. So there's some efforts that have to take place in advance of actually constructing it, and then to construct it during the time of the year that will allow us to do mostly what's going to be concrete work. It needs to be not during the middle of our winter season.
You're telling me that if we can reconstruct Main Street in 4 to 6 weeks, we can't reconstruct a simple little...
I can't comment on other projects, but I can tell you what I'm working on.
I was being
I understand the drill.
It just seems...
You know, something like the Quaker says, hey, Casey, you probably could get something done.
No problem. I appreciate humor. So there is some work to be done. The renovations, just briefly, what this would include, just so you're aware, what we're recommending is the majority of the work has to do with resurfacing the facility and bringing the pool area up to grade. That's one of our main issues, is that slip issue with going down the sides of the old pool. And then, of course, we have the concrete is worn, and we need to basically put in new surfacing. and we would do some work with separating the water lines. We have it's on the same meter as the Carnegie Center, and that's causing some water pressure issues for the building. We would add new spray heads that would improve the usage, that would also give us some conservative water consumption, makes it more sustainable, and just some other general improvements. You wouldn't see, what you would see on the ground would be basically the main difference you would see on the ground is just that the grade would be raised underneath. We'd have improved the system. We'd use a lot of what's there to, for sustainability purposes. We're going to use as much of this existing system that we can, but we're also going to improve that. So as long as we have to tear everything up, it's a good time to go in and say, let's make it, a little bit nicer, a little bit more user friendly. There's some discussion in regard to the context of this whole thing about a new water feature, something more than what we have, something that sounds like is a nice vision, but what I'm recommending is, because of timing and getting what is a very, very popular summertime feature, and I heard from a lot of those folks, and I understand that a lot of you heard from a lot of the folks that were unhappy about it being closed this summer, is we would like to get this open by next summer. In order to do that, I think to take the broader discussion as a separate issue and explore that, if that's what you choose to do as a commission. The type of facility that was just briefly discussed at a meeting a while back is something that will take, I think, some thoughtful planning and discussion, and probably some thinking about where to locate it, what the appropriate place would be, as well as, I think, the amount of money that we're talking about to build and maintain that facility goes above and beyond, I think, what, at least on the shorter term here, what we've got available. I mean, that's up, and again, that's your decision. But so just for the purpose of not causing the Carnegie Center spray park to be offline for another year, or possibly a couple of years, depending on how long that process would take, I would recommend that we go forth with what we have there. We utilize the available funds that Mr. Wimmer has pointed out in the report here that are available within that first year. And then that's all that we're recommending, at least currently, for use of the spray park. And then I think Nancy's going to talk about some further recommendations. So I'm going to stop there, and unless you have questions for me now.
Just a quick comment. I must admit, when I saw the Rivercrest park go in, and water park go in there, I was rather disappointed with that happened at the Carnegie Park, but of course that would have been appropriate for the Carnegie facility. So
that's very provincial thinking.
That's right. I believe that. Anyway, the thing is, I do think there'd be nice at one point to have additional amenities associated with the spray park, so I do support that, but I don't think it can be the kind of thing that happened at Rivercrest. I just don't think it would be appropriate with the facility and the surrounding environment. But as I say, I look out for some jealousy, even though I don't use it.
Come on up.
Commissioner, I appreciate what you're saying, which is why we've taken the thought that as long as we're in there, we'll make, you won't see grandiose improvements, and I don't want to paint a picture that we're not going to live up to something that you're thinking differently, but we'll do some nicer components than we have in there now. They'll still be all in-ground flush, nothing above ground. Like you said, we wouldn't be able to get away with that at the Carnegie Center, but there will be some variations and some differences.
Within the 40,000 cell?
Yes. No, I'm talking about within the 40,000. So, yeah. So it would be nicer than it is now, and more. That's why I'm talking about a little bit more user-friendly, some different spray components.
And more water coming through those nozzles.
I think you'd see a difference there.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
Well, what I was going to talk about is the impacts on the water fund itself with the 10% South Fork Water Board rate increase. David Wimmer put together a second spreadsheet that tries to illustrate the revenues
increased costs to the water fund because of the increased rates at South Fork. And as you know, we purchase our water from South Fork directly, and that is at the expense of the water fund. And then, of course, we also raised our rates 3% this year, and that's not to be overlooked. But interestingly enough, because the rate increase at South Fork goes directly to our water fund, there's no pass-through to the customers. And so while the extra cost to the water fund is about $117,000 next year, making certain assumptions about water consumption and purchasing. And our rate increase was planned to bring in about $150,000. And of course, the offset between paying additional money to South Fork for our water purchase means a net increase in revenues to the water fund of $35,000, which is quite a bit less than we are trying to achieve with our annual 3% rate increases. And similarly, David and I projected out for the years if South Fork continues to increase their rates 3% a year, and we continue to increase our rates 2% a year. It's about a 25%. About 25% of our rate increase goes towards paying South Fork just to purchase the water. So I'm not proposing that we try to solve that long-term problem. It's something that we need to think about when we're looking at our rates, and certainly with all of the upcoming discussion and public involvement, et cetera, that is going to occur about our water rates and our water fund by 2014. I hope it gets resolved. Those are just things we need to be aware of. But the big hit of the 10% is something that we wanted you to consider using some of the interest from this loan to assist in backfilling that hit. It's a hit on the water fund. So what we're recommending, just to get to the end, is we were recommending that the first priority would be to get the Carnegie Spray Park back in order, working order for next summer. And as Scott mentioned, that's about $40,000. If you backfill the entire if you backfill the water fund, that would leave still about, over the 5-year period, about $100,000 for other projects, in which we all know there's just infinite number of wasted money in Oregon City, as we've been talking about even this evening. But some ideas were to continue covering impacts to the water fund, or to say supplement the Metro Enhancement Fund and put it into that cubby hole, or to purchase public art to either augment 7th Street, or there are other locations in Oregon City that would be fabulous to have public art, or to construct a water feature or start a fund for another spray park facility in Oregon City, kind of start the planning process like Scott was mentioning, or other commissioner ideas. So that's our recommendation, and it's really, for you guys to discuss and make some determinations.
I guess one of the greatest concerns I've got is the ongoing concerns about future PERS outlays, and whether what we have in the PERS fund will actually meet those future PERS outlays. And I don't think probably nobody has any good predictions as to what that will be. I guess I would prefer to see a greater percentage going to PERS. I mean, this turns out to be all for naught at one point, then there'll be monies available to us. But it's something that could really impact the city in the future. I don't know if the city manager has any views on that or not.
We considered that in our recommendation, and I think Dave's got probably a little bit of information to share with you about where we are with PERS. I'll let Dave explain it, because we're feeling pretty comfortable that we can spend that 40 and not be in any trouble.
That's a good point. I'm not ready to talk about the PERS. The first thing we have here is our own reserve. It's been working very, very well for us, so that we keep our internal rates moderated, even though PERS is going up and around and around. We're just cutting right through it and not having to increase our rates internally. And the additional 40,000 or 39,000, 40,000 would not make. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. So,
yes.
I mean, 40,000 over the freight park is going to have a huge effect compared to the 40,000 to the PERS fund.
And frankly, one of the advantages of being understaffed, maybe one of the only advantages of being understaffed, is that your PERS is less impact to you than it would be if you had a staff typical of a city our size. So.
Questions for each one of David, Scott, and Nancy. David, first for you, when are the interest payments from South Fork to us scheduled to begin?
But the amortization schedule shows it's going to be June 1st of each year.
So
it'll be June 1st, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Okay, so does the budgeting for this really not start until the next fiscal year?
No, we have this. We have the revenue in this year's budget. As far as these extra expenditures, they need a budget adjustment, but that's no big deal.
I don't understand how if the interest payments don't come till June 1st, we're already spending money on.
Well, I mean, you don't receive money evenly throughout the year, and we're going to receive almost all of our money here within the next month or so when we receive taxes as far as the general fund goes. I mean, a lot of the funds receive their money in the summer, and they don't spend it until next
summer. Anticipated that revenue in this year's budget.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. In what you're proposing for the amendments to the budget.
Expenditures will be the amendments.
Right. Because these weren't, we had already adopted the budget when the proposal came out.
Right. The money is actually in contingency. This money we didn't appropriate, so if we were going to spend the 40,000, we'd move 40,000 from contingency over to there, and we'd also, if we're going to transfer money to the water fund, we'd take money out of the general fund contingency and put into transfers to the water funds.
Yes. So, when would be the timeline for adopting these budget amendments?
We could do that anytime. If you guys agree that this is what we want to do, we can.
Yeah. I'm just wondering the timing on why you've come before us now.
Because you asked us to.
Okay, I was confused because I didn't anticipate this so soon because it was indicated that the interest payments weren't going to be starting until next June. So I didn't expect this discussion for quite some time.
Well, I know part of it was too when we first talked about it. Mr. Wimmer was reminding us that they could pay the loan off early, which means the amount of interest revenue that would be available to you for any of these purposes might be reduced. So I think Dave probably felt the safest bet was to say, well, we feel very comfortable about the 40, but the remaining amount of that 257 is less certain. Well, because if they pay it off early, there's less interest.
Yeah. I've changed my assumption. I'm assuming they're going to go to term on it. So, I mean, take that variable out of it and just assume that's going to be the case.
But it's not going to affect the money you're talking about here anyway.
Well, it would, because if South Park paid off the loan today, you wouldn't have $250,000 extra interest.
Well, that's true.
But what do you think the odds are on that, David?
Well, when we have summers like this, when it's raining all summer, the odds are very good. If we had 6 months of 100-degree weather, they would have some extra cash. Right. Okay. But for the next 2 or 3 years, nothing will change from this schedule, I'm sure.
Here's what I wanted to propose to Scott and the Commission and David. It's a bleak reference in the Commission report to some, an idea that was more ambitious for more than a spray park was what I proposed with Professor on the book on Dreisaitl, and I'm still in favor of that. And what I think could happen, I don't think I necessarily agree that it's one or the other. That we could not, pursue a spray park and then pursue something of a higher amenity for the citizens. Because I think with
And it kind of came up with the discussion on the end of the trail, as being sequential and building upon something that would take a longer period of time. And I think that even now a plan could be developed, maybe with an RFP, maybe with a acceptance of the bidding process or wherever, where somebody comes on board and we look at the numbers going out a few years, where the whatever is designed in such a way that the engineering, for example, satisfies the need for a spray park this summer, but whatever the end design is envisioned could kind of build upon what the spray park idea is. We have the Chevrolet spray park that opens next summer, but as years go by, we develop an amenity that is more attractive and more useful for the citizens. I don't think you have to do anything also.
Well, it reminds me of Johnny Cash's song about Cadillac in the lunchbox. But I don't think you're asking about that because that would be kind of a hodgepodge. What I'm hearing is more like a modular, almost when you build a modular building, you build it so that you can add features and components later. So you're wondering if you couldn't have some design work on this.
Well, I think to do that, the designer would have to be hired right up front. And the design would have to occur. And then over a period of years, the design would be implemented. But I don't think you could it would be a lot more difficult if you took the plan that's being proposed in the commission report, whereby all you do is the spray park without even conceptualizing and designing something more sophisticated and a higher quality amenity for the citizens. So that's one point I want the commission to consider. As to Nancy's idea, I guess I find myself in disagreement with it, and I think the reason I find myself in disagreement with it is that for both the spray park and this matter, had we not made this loan, all of you would be having to budget for this anyway, to find the money for the spray park, etc. When we were considering this loan, my interest in even having an interest payment from South Fork was to provide a revenue stream for, what I call, ecology or, amenities or conservation projects. In fact, I think I was the sole dissenting vote against the loan because I didn't think we were getting enough in a revenue stream. I think I was the same thing that these schools starting off for Easton was at 4.5 and the commission decided on 3.5. And so we've got this nice pile of money coming in, and now it seems that everybody's coming up to pounce on it and get their piece of it. And that's what I think Public Works is doing. I don't agree with that. Whatever cost increases is coming from South Fork is to me a function of South Fork's management. It's not something that I think we should be addressing with this loan. I think my personal opinion, and I may still be in a minority on this, is that this money should be used for those amenity items. The spray park is one idea, but I could think of several other amenity items that this money could be used for. And I've mentioned, for example, the water garden at Senator Falls, because we have Mrs. Wimmer and the riparians, kind of adopting that hillside for making it an amenity. And I would like to see funds like this used to support citizens for those kind of amenity developments. So that's where I kind of am falling on this, and so I see Scott being more ambitious, and I'm not. I'm sorry, Nancy, but I'm not. I'm receptive to your proposal.
I wanted to just respond that Public Works is not trying to pounce on this money. As the director of the department, I'm trying to backfill a hit by a substantial rate increase for 1 year, and I'm trying to act responsibly for the water fund. That's my purpose here.
Can I just make a comment real quick? This might just help you with your discussion or whatever you want to do here. Regarding the spray park issue and your idea, Commissioner Sita, here's the question I need to ask back. So just as your department director who would be in charge of this, I feel that it's important that I make you aware of the potential concerns that I have, so that later down the road you don't say, why didn't you say, because if the thing wasn't running by next summer or whatever. So this is what this is about. I think that is a nice vision. I don't disagree with it, and my recommendation isn't based on a disagreement from that. My recommendation is based on my sense of doing my job as recognizing what the community wants, and I know for certain that they would like that spray park to be back open by next summer. And the idea that you've got, if we approached it from that phased approach, here would be the pluses and minuses. The plus would be what you presented. I think the other side of it is what we would have to do is build a significant, sort of like the car analogy you were talking about, but I think what you're talking about is the stuff that's under the hood. We'd have to put a lot more under the hood. In other words, our infrastructure into the system we would have to put in now to have the capacity to do something, because we're talking about a much higher level of water usage and probably different levels of operating systems. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not trying to be one, but we would have to put a lot more in up front. And the question that I have that raises for me is, do we expend that time and that resource without having gone and talked to the neighborhood or anything and said, do you want a bigger thing in your park here or whatever? And they may the neighborhood may love it, the community may love it, but they may not. They may say, we don't really want this here, because to be honest with you, I'm very familiar with these types of, this is my job, is to know about those types of things. The ones in Portland, there's a really nice one in Wilsonville. There's a couple of others out on the west side. I've seen them in other communities. They draw a lot of people in. They become an attraction. And the question is, anything that we talk about in and around the Carnegie Center, for me, because of all the discussions that we've had and all the experiences, is I always have a sensitivity to what we're creating and what we're drawing into that place, because I know that the neighborhood there is very sensitive about impact. And so my question is do you want to spend, just to hire the engineer and the design costs up front, and to put in the additional infrastructure that I'm certain would be probably in the tens of thousands more than we're talking about, just plan for a future facility? I could do that for you if that's what the commission asked me to do. I have the capability of doing that, and if you directed these funds that way, I'd be happy to do that. But I think we'd be putting the cart before the horse, because we haven't talked to the neighborhood about it. And I think then we get into the discussion again of my initial comments to you. What I really want to make very clear is I just want I need a sense of direction from you sooner than later. In fact, if we wait another meeting, we're going to be 30 more days behind, or till the next, whatever it might be. But we really do need to get rolling with our planning processes. And I think if we don't start in the next couple or few weeks, we're going to be quite a ways behind the curve. So I guess that's my question, is the whole process question, expending those resources to do that, and doing the design. We've already got a design for these improvements that we're talking about now. We're ready to move into the permitting and the planning process.
How did you get the design, if I may ask?
We've just worked with folks that help us come up with concepts. What we're talking about is a very simple. We don't have
essentially replacement.
Yeah, it's almost more of a replacement thing. It's not we don't have engineered design. It's just we have just simple plans. That's what this renovation is that we're talking about. It's a simple plan versus then if we get into designing a brand new facility, that's where we do get into, I think, some additional things. So again, I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea. All I'm saying is my professional recommendation is just to make you aware that of the timing concerns that I've got and the constraints that we're working within. And if we don't begin the process soon of moving forward, I cannot make you a promise that I can open that by next summer. And I don't mean that to sound like I'm holding that over you as a threat. Because again, whatever direction the commission wants to go, we're prepared to move in that direction. But I do want to be honest with you about my concerns.
Well, let me let's go back and come back. Rocky?
A couple of comments. First is I think that we didn't foresee what was going to happen with the Carnegie Park, and that's something that's desperately needed to be corrected. So we have more so now because the library's there, and it's going to be a resource. There's going to be people there, and I agree to somewhat with a discussion in the future about creating something at a larger scale. But as Doug was saying, the Carnegie Center probably is not that's not a site for something that probably is going to be conducive to a larger, grandiose vision. I mean, it doesn't fit that place. I really think, I feel like I can support when it comes to a straight decision to move pretty quickly on fixing what is at the Carnegie Center. I think we need to do that as soon as possible. I also share a little bit of the same concern in terms of the water fund. I mean that's something we have seen coming, and we know that that's issue. So there's kind of this different thing where we have the Carnegie Center, which we have to deal with. The other one when it was a surprise. I kind of would like to see the remainder after the Carnegie Center gets fixed. Very hard. Maybe to go into a fund, or to say, to talk about some future plan or some design that's broader. But and I'm willing to listen to the discussion about what everyone else feels about backfilling that hole in the water fund. But I think that's one that we kind of knew was coming, and so I think Tim makes a fairly good point on that. But I'm definitely willing to discuss that.
Okay, Doug.
I basically agree with Rocky in terms of the pool, the need to have that fixed. It was a disappointment to the people, many people, that attended the Cottage Park and brought kids with them. And his point is a strong one, that through these sure factors will be lots of kids going to the library facility, especially in the summertime. So I think that's, I think it's critical need. Although I know we got some statistics earlier on from David Wimmer, I still don't know if the rollback occurs. I still don't know the impact when that rollback occurs, if we included a 3% increase throughout that whole period of time, from the time that went into the 3% cap went into effect. There were a few years where we didn't do the 3%, and if we actually looked at that prior to making the decision on the backfilling of this issue and see what that differential is, I feel a lot more comfortable. And so I feel that Nancy Kajau's request is a little premature. We've already had a chance to discuss that at a study session. Now, we got memos about it, but I'm not good at financial spreadsheets. I devoted with them when they talk about fish survival data and so forth.
Just a quick comment that this isn't intended to fix the water fund issue. Right. This is just, we had a big, huge rate increase from South Fork of 10%, and it's only to help mitigate that impact on this year's budget.
Yeah. Okay.
Or Jim, so would that be a relief for ratepayers in any way? Are you not envisioning that?
Not a direct. It would just be meeting the budget that we had planned for.
During the course of this discussion, one of the things I've realized is that I think one of the problems I'm having this discussion is I don't know what's designed for this repair project. I mean, you say you have drawings, but you don't present them to us. I don't know if I, as an elected, representative of the citizenry, who is charged with kind of making these judgments on these kind of things, can give you marching orders when I don't know from you, what you're having us fund. And I think it would be fair for us, before we go to make a decision on that, is to have the drawings, especially if you already have them, on what it exactly is we're funding. And the second comment I'll make is that as far as enhancing the amenity, maybe there's another option of enhancing it qualitatively as opposed to quantitatively. And that wouldn't take any more engineering or anything like that as far as pipes, but whatever water flows, are being used, and we don't add to that, we can make it so that the design of the water feature is a more positive experience for the citizenry than something very basic, and that would be less expensive, but still also enhance the project.
Scott.
And I understand your concerns of your question. What we've got basically is a conceptual idea. It has to be fine-tuned. The big thing here, I think one of the big things that we're dealing with is the historic review board process, and we're being very conscientious of the fact that we're going to have to be working through that and responding to that. In my staff report and the portion that I wrote about the spray park, again, what we're talking about is repairs and renovations that will include resurfacing the facility, bringing the old pool area flush to the rest of the surface, a water meter separation from the existing one, so it's just an internal water, or it's a water meter issue. The part where it's a little conceptual, but I mean, what I meant by I probably misled you with my comment. It was just a choice of a word. We have a concept idea that looks something like that I'd be happy to provide you, but it really is extremely conceptual. It was basically our staff, Denise, working with a contractor who did our Rivercrest Spray Park and offered at no cost to help us sort of conceptualize the idea because they understand the system. And then adding some new spray heads, but all being mostly what you see right now, only bringing it up. The majority of what we're doing this for is for safety reasons, and some of it also is improving the usability of it, but it's by adding a few different types of heads that we don't have right now, but essentially you will see the same thing. So that's really all I can tell you. There is no big grand design. It's a very simple renovation. It would be conceptualized, and we'd be working through that with HRB. The components within the system are like we're talking about a few nozzles and spray heads underground. So,
well, that actually helps me because I mean, when I brought this up months ago when we first talked about it, I really was conceiving of something ambitious like Jameson Square Park is ambitious. But from what you show and describe to me there, I think I do come to the conclusion that we can be much more ambitious in design than that as a higher quality amenity for the citizens without going the quantum leap to a Jameson Square. And that's what I'd like the Commission to consider.
I guess I don't have any problem repairing it, getting it back in service as quickly as possible. I always like amenities that have some artistic flair or something. But one of the basic services I think we provide our citizens is the ability to use our parks in certain ways, and this is an expected use of that area and is so popular. So I think this time I would go to let's get that basic service back in play, because while I love the idea of having Mesita Square in Oregon City, with a wonderful water feature.
We're not going to call it that.
Oh, yeah.
I know not.
I wouldn't want to hear it. He's going to be dead first. I love that idea, but I think we're kind of at a time where basic services really count, and that one does. I wouldn't be against putting the rest of the funds aside to draw into this while we consider what to do. Because part of me, again, considers basic service backfilling our public utilities. But yet it's always a great opportunity to plan for something bigger. But I think, to do it right now, I think that's just a longer term project that I think the thing that resonated with me that in Scott's report was got to be a lot of neighborhood and citizen input, I think, to design that and where it goes. Is that really the best place for it? I think to decide that tonight would be
off the top of my head.
It does get new water in the
It may get underwater.
Definitely
and give replenishment. But anyway, that's my view. Doug.
Replace the heads with more spray going to the kids. Most of those heads are pretty wimpy in terms of the spray they got.
Mayor, I'm going to ask Denise. She's been sitting here listening this whole time. She is our water spray park expert, frankly, and I just asked her if there's any other stuff that I've forgotten or left out, or just general comments to make those.
Generally, what we're looking at is to cover the space with water.
Good.
And not only to cover the space, but still conserve water. So we're looking at our primary users are toddlers, really young ones. And so we don't want to scare them from the water. We want them to integrate themselves into the water. So what we're looking at is more of a missing quality, but still getting them very wet without a lot of water usage. And so there's in-ground flush nozzles now that have that capacity to do what we call a flower spray. And so it covers a lot of area without a lot of water, really. But they get wet, they get to play in it, and there's no fear of, we have a few shock value nozzles right now, or non-shock value nozzles. So we'll probably discontinue the use of those and put in more modern, usable, water conservative nozzles.
Any more questions of Denise?
Does that mean we're going to have more of a moss problem?
And when we have moss is when we don't have the system on. So what the moss problem isn't seasonal. It is seasonal, but not when we're running it.
That winter moss.
It's a winter moss issue, not a straight park issue.
So, Mayor, I'd like to make a comment and then maybe bring it back to the direction we need from you on two things. One, whether to proceed with the repairs, renovations, as you've heard tonight, or do something different. Two, whether to revisit the amount of money and kind of hold that off to the side for a longer discussion another time. Before you give us direction on those two things, though, I want to mention that Nancy's concern about this water fund is one that I've been looking at too a little bit and thinking about with regard to the rollback and the work the city attorney's doing. At some point, we need to get ourselves to a place where whatever increases we are getting from the utility provider, the provider of the commodity, so that we can recover those full costs from our system, because it isn't sustainable. So we're not measuring up with council goal. I can't remember the number, but we need to get back there. That's right, number one. Thank you. And so I'm seeing the solution of that problem, that legal quandary, if you will, what to do and what our options are, of being the first threshold we need to get over before we look at a rate study that will allow this fund to be made whole. And I think what Nancy's after here and her suggestion, believe me, there was plenty of wrangling around the staff table. So there was, it wasn't easy for them either. So don't feel like it's an easy question. But it's, I think, trying to soften the blow for, well, what if, in the eventuality, we're not able to solve that problem with some other solution? How, she's just being, I think, cautious. And then also, I want to thank all of you for this dialogue because it's a work session. And so if we miss the drawing or there's something we need to do more, this is the kind of dialogue we want to have so we can come back to the drawing board. So we're ready for direction, I think, if you're ready to give it to us.
Okay, is there any objection then to directing staff to work on fixing the park?
Have a different vision, but in the minority.
Okay, got that one. And then the rest of the money, we'll start with, want to put it aside for a more robust discussion after we know more about the water rates and maybe have hear more from the community about whatever vision we may want to create.
Yes. Having gone through master plan after master plan and capital improvement program after capital improvement program, and also given the commission's goals for citizen involvement, and you have Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and it seems like the kind of decision that it would be probably a different, would it be a new project maybe, and it seems like there might be a process, but that's for Scott to address. That occurred to me. I know.
You mean for a new facility, not for the request?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay, any questions into that one kind of that direction? Okay. Staff understand your questions answered?
I'm not sure on the point Nancy made. Could you make that again? It's new.
Well, for example, if I was going to go start spending money on a new transportation project, I would have gone through, it would be in my master plan, and it would have been vetted publicly. But there could be different for parks projects. I just know when you've got rates, particularly in SDCs, you need to be following that public process.
I'll just support Nancy's comments. I would do the same thing. I would recommend the same thing that we do with PRACs. That actually probably ties back to my comments about the public input portion of this that I would be concerned that we'd be ahead of or whatever if we were designing something different. Just doing the renovation, it's very similar to what you see now. And PRAC is aware of the need to do this, and I think will appreciate the fact that we're able to go forward and get it done. So, but if there was a new or a broader vision, I think Nancy's simply saying it would be good to go through PRAC, and I'm just supporting that comment. I know that it would be. So.
Any additional on that? All right, thank you. Then next, I see that we have Nancy has done a great job, as usual, of getting the city commission meeting organized for the future. I guess my comment would be that it looks very ordinary. Yeah, but it looks good to me. You ask me as long as you like. Whatever day we want. Yeah, whatever day you want. I guess I just want to remind the commission that the work session, I don't know if you should consider it locked in stone in that we've had to juggle it several times over the 8 years because of certain work sessions or college schedules or whatever. So that has floated a number of ways, and you may need to be flexible on that. So,
but I could, without knowing the composition of the commission, that might even apply to regular meetings.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
The one thing that is kind of in stone is we need to plan our retreat, and to get people on schedule, I have to have that commitment kind of adhered to. If it's okay.
You're not going to really know that till November 4th either. Because there may be people that have a vacation scheduled, so you may not really be able to lock that in.
All your vacation schedule.
You won't spend money until after the 4th.
I think you could probably safely set that.
So on the 3rd, we'll be calling whoever prevails.
I think that's right. I think I don't know if we should even direct our attention to this or anything. I think to contact those who are elected at that particular time is more appropriate.
The only reason that I was trying to get it through, or at least tentatively, is fine. We could put these schedule things on the calendar. There's lots of meetings and lots of people wanting this room, and so we try to. Well, of course, City Commission would bump anyone, but generally we want to put it on the calendar so others don't know that they know that meeting room is not available that evening and so forth. So it's just important to.
I think you could make it tentative call.
Yeah, we could put things on the calendar and then in January make the adjustments as needed.
They won't actually be taking the seats until January, so we really cannot wait to plan that retreat. We do have.
No. You've got November 4th.
Yes.
November 4th, people will know the schools.
I hope so.
You will know who to ask anyway. Usually, that's too close to call. Okay, any other comments or questions about the calendar? All right, City Manager's report. Everyone this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do. It's going to be a little bit lengthy, so bear with me. Because Mr. Archer started off when we were talking about the water park and the planning process that's available that he uses typically, and because the Kenema neighborhood chair is still here and during our meeting, I think I should defer to Scott. He's going to talk a little bit about the planning process they're using in Kenema.
We have, I believe, a public work session or a public hearing on Monday, right?
Correct. This is just a reminder that to you and to anybody that's interested that happens to be tuned in that we're having a Kenema neighborhood discussion regarding the renovations and improvements of the Kenema neighborhood park, and that will be Monday night at 7 o'clock at the Pioneer Center.
This is relative to the state grant.
That is correct.
The city has received.
That is correct. Yes. So it'll be informational and it'll be interactive and participatory.
Thank you. The next thing I want to report to the Commission is that the candidate forum that was held last night is presumably is going to be on our website Thursday night or Thursday afternoon, and that. Assuming we get the DVD, we'll have it on the web, and that facilitates Goal 5 citizen participation. Also, I went to the Main Street Oregon City event this morning, and there were lots of awards and lots of accolades for the different programs in Main Street. Two of note were Laura Rambo, the Volunteer of the Year for the state. She was there and got an award from the Main Street folks, as was Rob Crocker for the Innovation Award. Both of those presented by the First Lady of Oregon within the last couple of weeks. Also, I sat next to Marge and Earl Harding, and they informed me that they're off to Williamsburg, Virginia, historic Williamsburg, to do 3 presentations on the role of women in American history. So we have our historic ambassadors traveling from Oregon City back east.
So all is going on. For what?
So the new thing I want to mention is Maureen Cole, she left earlier tonight to go to the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association meeting, and I, as you know, have been encouraging our department heads to attend those meetings whenever possible to give the most direct information we can to our neighborhood associations. And so she went there. Goal 5, citizen participation. Also, she wanted me to mention that we have a very noted storyteller there, a gentleman named Will Horniak. He's going to be at the library for storytelling from 6 to 9 on October 23rd. The library is now decorated in the fall version of Carnegie, so that's very interesting too. And then I wanted to remind you that there's the EID question and answer session Thursday noon at the Cypress. There'll be representatives there from Oregon City Main Street. I'll be there as well, trying to answer questions. Our staff has worked pretty closely with researching implementation through the county assessor's office. As you can imagine, if this thing takes place, there's a lot of gymnastics that have to go on, mostly in Mr. Wimmer's department and coordinating other activities with other departments in the city. So everyone's busy trying to figure out who's going to do what, when, and how. But we'll get it done. But we're working on that behind the scenes. Also, let's see here. Also today, I talked to our department heads in our executive meeting, and something I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's not very original. It's something Toyota Motor Corporation started doing about 15 years ago, and other cities have picked up on it, and even government offices at the Federal Reserve Bank and other places, and that is an employee rewards program. I'm interested in doing that because I really believe that some of our frontline staff have some of the best, most creative ideas on how the organization can operate more efficiently and save money here and there. So we're trying to set up a program protocol. It won't be very much of a reward. There'll be criteria. It'll probably be a couple $100. There'll probably be limitations on how many ideas you can bring up, and they have to be ones we actually use, and they have to be certified to actually save money. So they'll be reviewed by our executive team before we make those awards. But that's a program that I think will get our employees more invested with management on what we're trying to do as a mission together. So that's one thing. That is ties into Goal 6, fiscal health and long-term financial stability. And then the last thing with the employees is I'm going to start doing this coffee and questions event. At each department I'm going to visit periodically, maybe at least once a year, maybe twice a year, go to that department with the directors and sit down and just have a roundtable discussion with them, let them know from our level some of the things my office is working on, some of the things the commission is working on and the executive team, and also get ideas back from them, input from them on what's working well, what isn't working well. It's amazing to me sometimes the things they hear that they assume or they might think we're doing that we're not doing, or they think we're doing it for one reason, but we really have a different reason. So I want to try to communicate more closely with them, so I'll be setting those up as well. And then next, I'm also writing a letter to support a grant for the Oregon City Rotary Club on their water feature work they want to do on Singer Hill Falls. They're trying to get some grant. We've already given them Metro money, but they're trying to compete for a smaller amount of money from the county program. So I'll be working on that. That's goal 2 and 4.
Do you know what the status is of the first phase of that project is? I think it was supposed to be to replace kind of that board mural at the base of the railroad tracks. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall right offhand. Yeah, I think right now they have a broad concept, but I think we're all trying to chase money before we finalize the
money they got for something very, very serious.
There is an art project. Yes, it's
an art status of that art project.
They're not going to start that until they have applied for all the funds and have all of it in one lump, is my understanding. So.
Cheryl Snow, about getting an artist, the concept. It's a several-year project.
Would you like us to report as soon as we know?
I would, because my recollection of the grant was something tangible and concrete, like a replacement of that mural.
It is. It's not. It's a couple of years down the road.
They can apply for it. Like
so we'll get back. We'll research that and get back to you. Let's see here. I'm not quite done. Okay, so I'm going to be doing that. That's writing a letter of support for that grant application, and that's goal 2, economic development, and 4, livability. And then last but not least, I saved what I think is maybe the most compelling part for the end. We'll be sending out a press release sometime tomorrow about the police department going to 410 shifts. And what's exciting to me about this is that it proves that government can operate more efficiently than because typically we hear government should be more efficient, and this is a great example of efficiency and also providing more with less. We're going to have, as a result of this move, and actually I have to give Chief Conrad a lot of credit, as well as the people that work in his department, because this came from them, and outward to the rest of us. It facilitates goal 2 to maintain an environment that promotes safety and economic growth. It also enhances livability and maintains the financial stability of the community, and even potentially some goal 5 implications depending on which citizens participate from the increased patrol work that they'll be doing. It might be a targeted audience, but some citizens will be participating more. But essentially what this does, it allows them, when they're on these 410 shifts, when they have their shift changes, we have additional coverage, and we have it in the places we need it the most, which historically, I think traditionally in almost every city I know of, the hours between 9 o'clock at night and 3 p.m. in the morning are the heaviest call volume. And this new schedule allows us to double the number of officers during the busiest times. So it's kind of such a no-brainer. I'm surprised but it's an excellent idea. The schedule will also permit Oregon City to have more supervisory personnel. Will increase the number of sergeants that are in the field. So I think the quality of the work and the liability from the activities that are engaged in will also go down while the quality goes up. It also provides alternate supervisors, so in the event of emergency or an illness, we'll have better coverage there. So this is just, I think, a great thing, and I want to thank Mike and all the team at the PD for coming up with it and making it happen. And the press release will go out tomorrow, and you'll get a copy. So.
I assume that one of the reasons that we're able to do this is because we now have the right number of officers to be able to have the coverage.
Yeah, that was one of the benefits of the COP grant program. Finally put us the number of officers where we could actually go to 10-hour shift. We weren't able to do that until we got those positions in. So it's been really beneficial to us and to the community. And like Mr. Fraser said, it allows us to be a lot more proactive in how we approach our community livability issues as opposed to reacting with the minimum number of staff we had in the past.
Thank you, Federal Government. Rocky.
Yeah, I just got to say, too, I was talking to David before the meeting, the visibility of the police force, I've never seen it at this level, and it's so, when you're out around the community, and when I'm walking around town in the middle of the night, there's some years where I remember doing tours in the evening where I would see, a police car come by occasionally, and it's amazing how frequent I see cars go by. How many times the police officers ask what the heck I'm doing out there in the middle of the night. But it's just a good feeling. And to see that and to know, a step like that has really made that much of a change. And I think in terms of morale in the department and just the feeling of the community, I think it's so great to see it. And I think a year ago, how far we've come in a year. And I really appreciate the work that you've done. I think the police department has come farther than I imagined it ever coming in that short amount of time. And so it's incredible work.
Well, thank you, but I have a wonderful crew of people that I'm very, very privileged to work for. And I'd also like to thank the Commission for their support for the police department last year, too.
That's all I have here.
All right.
I got a notice, an email about a trolley tour too.
Oh, no.
The Public Works project.
Oh, Public Works tour.
Yes.
Our Is this Friday? Is that right?
Yeah, this Friday afternoon, we're going to be, rather than doing ribbon cuttings at 4 different locations, the two that we are really, it's very important that we cut the ribbons, is for the McLaughlin Promenade project, the Historic Preservation project, and then the Warner Milne project, because those are the stimulus funding that we got from Washington, D.C. And then the Holcomb Boulevard, completing the phase 1 of Holcomb Boulevard, the sidewalk project, is really, to me, it's meaningful because the whole planning process for that Holcomb corridor and the partnership with the county to fund this phase 1 has been really a very, very public process, and it's what the community wanted, and it's taken us forever to deliver it, but we're finally there. And we'll hopefully do a phase 2 one day too, but that's an important one. And then also, the Amtrak station has been under a vision for so long. We had to do it in phases because of very limited funding. And then receiving the money from Metro enabled us to go to phase 2. So all of those are really exciting to finish up. And so we're having a trolley tour this Friday afternoon from 4 to 5:30. We'll start here at City Hall, do a walking tour of the promenade, get on the trolleys, tour the other projects, and then end up downtown at the square, where people then hopefully will feel excited to go out and have a meal or a beer or whatever, something fun to do in downtown Oregon City too. So it should be a fun event.
Great. And the last thing is, I'm going to be, again, at ICMA training from the 15th to the 20th. You have a commission meeting on the 20th. I've asked Scott Archer to fill in for me while I'm absent. And but I will have this gizmo, and so if you need to get a hold of me, you can do that.
Will you be back for the commission meeting?
I have to check my flight to see if I'm back here in time. If I am, I will be here.
Is there an urban renewal commission that meeting that day?
There was. I believe there is one scheduled. Yeah.
So we're going to have an urban renewal commission meeting without you there? Frankly, I'm happy with that.
We can not have it, but
I'd rather.
why don't you let me verify my return flight time? I mean, I don't mind coming in after I get back, but let me verify that, and I'll email you tomorrow and let you know what time I'm getting back, and if you want us to change schedules, just let us know. Let the mayor know. Let me know so we can do that.
Okay. We are done.